Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're heading to Sardinia, digging into an ancient mystery surrounding these incredible little bronze figures, the bronzetti. You've probably seen pictures, tiny warriors, gods, animals, symbols of the island's Nuragic culture. But for ages, nobody could quite pin down where the metal actually came from. Well, guess what? That puzzle. It looks like it's finally been cracked. We're going deep into a new study that uses some seriously cutting-edge science. We'll explore how this is changing everything we thought we knew about Bronze Age trade, those ancient connections, and even the people themselves. Turns out the ancient world might have been a lot more connected than we realized.
Exactly. And our main source for this deep dive is a fantastic paper in PLOS One, along with some related work. It details what they call a multi-proxy approach, which sounds complex, but basically means using a whole toolkit of chemical analyses together, not just one test. They looked at isotopes of copper, tin, lead. But the real breakthrough, the sort of secret weapon, was adding osmium isotopes into the mix. This method, developed over at the Curt-Engelhorn Center for Archaeometry, well, it was the key that unlocked the whole thing.
Okay, let's get into it. These bronzettis are just fascinating, aren't they? Tiny little things, some just a few inches tall, warriors with those famous horned helmets, gods, animals, and they're tied to the Nuragic culture, famous for those big stone towers, the nuraggers you still see all over Sardinia. But yeah, figuring out the metal's origin. Why was that so incredibly difficult for so long?
It really was notoriously tricky. The older methods, well, they just had limitations. Take lead isotope analysis, super useful, but often the results from Sardinia would look quite similar to results from other places.
Ah, okay, so you get overlap. Makes it hard to be sure.
Precisely. It created ambiguity. You couldn't say with certainty, this metal is local, or this metal came from, say, Cyprus. It left a huge gap in understanding their skills and their trade.
Right. So if lead isotopes weren't enough, what changed? What was the breakthrough with this new study?
The breakthrough was definitely this multi-proxy idea. Think of it like forensic science. You don't rely on just one fingerprint, right? You build a case. So they combine the clues from copper isotopes, tin isotopes, lead isotopes, building a much clearer picture. But the absolute game changer was osmium. Adding osmium isotope analysis, that provided a unique signature. It cut through all that previous confusion, really gave them the clarity they needed.
Okay, here we go. The big reveal. After all this high-tech detective work, what did they find out about the copper? Was it local, imported? What was the story?
The story is pretty amazing, actually. The study showed quite clearly that the bronzettis were mostly made from local Sardinian copper, specifically from the Iglesiente mining district. They even think the Sado Chessa mine was likely the main source.
Wow, so they were really tapping into their own backyard. That's significant.
Huge. It confirms they had sophisticated mining operations and were making good use of their island's resources. Shows real self-sufficiency in a way.
But was it all local copper? Or was there more to it? Were they mixing things up?
Good question. And no, it wasn't just local copper. That's another fascinating layer. They found evidence that this Sardinian copper was sometimes mixed with copper brought in from the Iberian Peninsula.
Iberia, so modern Spain and Portugal.
That's right. Places like the Alcudia Valley or maybe the Linares district over there. So you see this blend right from the start, local materials plus imported stuff. They were already plugged into wider networks.
Okay, this next bit, though, I find really surprising. We know Sardinia had these things called oxide ingots, big slabs of copper, often from Cyprus, right? They found loads of them. Yet this study says Cypriot copper wasn't used for the bronzetti. And they also ruled out copper from the Levant, like from Timna or Fainan. How could they be so sure, especially about Cyprus?
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? But again, this is where the multi-proxy approach, especially osmium, was crucial. For the Levantine copper, while the lead isotopes might have looked similar sometimes, the osmium signature of Sardinian copper was totally different. Osmium was the tiebreaker, the unique fingerprint. And for the Cypriot copper, well, the lead isotope ratios from those ingots just didn't match the ratios found in the bronzetti in the first place. So even without osmium, the evidence pointed away from Cyprus for these specific figures.
So the osmium was like the definitive proof, the chemical fingerprint that couldn't be mistaken. Can you explain a bit more about what makes that Sardinian osmium signature so unique, these high radiogenic ratios?
Right, it gets a bit technical, but think of isotopes like different versions of an element. Some are formed by radioactive decay over geological time. Sardinian copper ores happen to have these extremely high radiogenic 187 Os, 188 Os ratios, basically a very specific osmium isotope signature. And this signature is strongly linked to local molybdenum deposits, specifically a mineral called molybdenite that's present in Sardinian geology alongside the copper. This unique geological quirk gives Sardinian copper an unmistakable chemical tag. It's like its geological DNA. Even if other isotopes looked a bit fuzzy, the osmium nailed the origin as Sardinian. It made the local ID incredibly robust.
Okay, that makes sense. A unique geological fingerprint. So we've got the copper sorted mostly local, sometimes mixed with Iberian imports, but bronze needs tin. What about the tin? Did they have that locally too?
Another great question, and another surprise, Sardinia actually does have its own sources of tin, and lead too, for that matter. But, and this is the interesting part, the study found that these local tin and lead sources were not being used to make these bronzetti. Seriously. They had local tin, but didn't use it for their iconic bronze figures. So it must have been imported then, all of it.
Looks like it. The tin needed to make the bronze was definitely imported. And the chemical evidence, again, points pretty strongly towards the Iberian Peninsula. The isotope signatures, and especially the low levels of indium in the bronzetti, match Iberian tin or cassiterite much better than, say, tin from Britain or Central Europe.
So Iberia was the go-to source for both imported copper and tin. Sardinia was a big importer then, at least for tin.
Absolutely. A net importer of tin. It really underscores those strong established trade connections with the Iberian West.
Right, so they're bringing in Iberian tin, maybe some Iberian copper, mixing it with their local Sardinian copper. It sounds like a deliberate process. The study mentioned evidence for mixing specifically. How do they know it was intentional mixing, not just, melting down old broken stuff? Yeah, that's a key point. The evidence for deliberate mixing is quite strong. They found these unnatural correlations, particularly negative correlations, in lead isotope ratios and other elements. These are patterns you just wouldn't expect to find in a single natural ore source. It points clearly to an anthropogenic cause. Humans were doing the mixing. But importantly, it doesn't look like they were recycling old bronze objects. If they were just melting down finished bronze things, you'd expect certain correlations with the tin isotopes too, reflecting the original bronze alloy, and those correlations just weren't there. So it seems much more likely they were mixing different batches of raw or semi-processed copper together before adding the imported tin to make fresh bronze.
Huh. So mixing the raw ingredients, not recycling finished goods. But why? Why mix different coppers? If they had plenty locally, why bother adding imported stuff?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it probably points to some real sophistication. There could be several reasons. Maybe they were trying to achieve specific properties in the final bronze. Think about color. Perhaps a certain mix gave a desired golden hue for a god figure, or maybe it affected the metal's strength or how easy it was to cast intricate details. Or it could just be practical. Maybe it was about managing resources using whatever shipments, local or foreign, were available or cheaper at the time. It shows flexibility and deep knowledge of their materials.
It really paints a picture of skilled artisans. And where was this happening? The study looked at figures from big Nuragic sanctuaries, Sumante Abini, Santa Vittoria. Did they find differences between the sites?
Interestingly, no. The metal recipes were remarkably similar across all three major sanctuaries. This suggests a really common approach to making these figures, island-wide perhaps. It strongly implies these sanctuaries weren't just places of worship, they were major hubs, political, religious, and economic. Metalworking seems to have been a key activity right there within the sanctuary precincts.
So, specialized craftspeople working almost under the direction of the sanctuaries.
Exactly. Operating under their auspices. It suggests a very organized system. You can almost picture this operational triangle they talk about.
Go on.
Well, imagine the mine, like Sa Ducessa, providing the raw ore. Then a nearby nuraghi village, maybe like Sa Demuz Sorku, representing the community, the labor. And finally, the sanctuary, like Mazzani, acting as the center for production, maybe distribution, and of course, where many figures ended up as offering.
That paints an incredibly sophisticated picture, a whole integrated system.
It really does, a complex network connecting resources, communities, and these central hubs, far from a simple, isolated society.
And the connections didn't stop in Iberia, did they? The study touches on something really unexpected, a Nordic connection. What on earth is that about?
Yeah, isn't that wild? Field studies have apparently uncovered these links between Sardinia and Scandinavia, dating roughly 1000 to 800 BC. The most striking evidence is the horned helmets. We see them famously on the bronzetti, but similar iconic horned helmets are known from Nordic finds, like those from Viksa in Denmark. And in Sardinia, they appear not just tiny, but also in huge stone sculptures.
Whoa, so shared symbols across that vast distance.
It seems so. It suggests maybe shared ideas about warriors, status, mythology, some kind of cultural conversation happening across Europe. It really blows open the idea of isolated Bronze Age pockets, much more interconnected.
And the Iberian connection wasn't just metal either, right? There were other parallels.
Definitely. Beyond the shared need for metals, both Sardinia and Iberia show similar themes in their warrior art. Think warrior figures. Though interestingly, in Iberia, they often carve these onto large stone slabs, stelae, often found near copper deposits, whereas Sardinia really focused on these portable bronze figurines found in sanctuaries. And Sardinia had its own unique contributions, too, like a specific type of dagger, the gamma-hilted stiletto, which you see on the bronzetti warriors, but seems purely Sardinian.
So, summing this part up, Sardinia wasn't just some island trading post. It was a real player, a hub.
Absolutely. Especially during that transition from the late Bronze Age into the early Iron Age, around the start of the first millennium BCE. It became a crucial geopolitical node. It was connecting trade networks spanning the Mediterranean and linking into the Atlantic world via Iberia. And it wasn't only about copper and tin anymore. Lead and silver became increasingly important too. We actually find Sardinian silver turning up in places like the Aegean and the Levant later on, showing just how wide these networks became. Sardinia was right in the middle of it all.
It's just incredible. This deep dive, using tools like osmium isotopes, has completely reshaped the picture of Nuragic Sardinia, hasn't it? They weren't isolated at all. They were expert metallurgists, cleverly mixing local and imported metals tied into vast trade routes, sharing ideas across continents. It's a much richer, more complex story.
It truly is. And while this research answers so many questions about where the metal for the bronzetti came from, it also, as good science often does, opens up new ones. Think about those Cypriot oxide ingots again. We know they were physically there in Sardinia, maybe in large numbers, but this study strongly suggests they weren't being melted down to make these particular bronzettis. So here's something for you, our listener, to really chew on. If those big, valuable Cypriot copper ingots weren't being used for making new things like the bronzetti, what was their purpose? Were they a form of early currency, maybe?
Yeah.
Used in trade without being melted? Or were they symbolic, maybe held in reserve or used for something else entirely? What do you think was going on with all that Cypriot copper sitting in Bronze Age Sardinia? It's still a bit of a mystery.